Hello students, today we are going to discuss the chapter The Portrait of a Lady by Khushwant Singh. It is a beautifully penned portrait of the narrator's grandmother. How many of you have grandparents at home? Those of us who do are slightly luckier than the others, as not only do grandparents shower us with unconditional love, they also protect us from our parents. Remember the last time you were in trouble and one or the other of your grandparents saved you from your angry parent. In the story, Khushwant Singh talks about his grandmother, a woman who led a graceful life nurturing all those around her. Before we begin with the story, let us familiarize ourselves with the writer. Born as Khushwant Singh on the 15th of August 1915 in Punjab, Khushwant Singh was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist and politician. He experienced the 1947 partition of India, which inspired him to write Train to Pakistan in 1956. It became his most well-known novel. Some of his other works include Delhi, a novel, I Shall Not Hear the Nightingale, and his short story collection includes The Voice of God and Other Stories, and A Bride for the Sahib, and Other Stories. Let us now begin with the story. The story is autobiographical fiction where Khushwant Singh speaks of his devout and religious grandmother with a lot of admiration, affection and respect. The author nostalgically recalls his grandmother, who was old and wrinkled for the 20 years that he had spent with her. As a child, the narrator had refused to believe that his grandmother had been pretty and young once and even had a husband. The narrator does not remember his grandfather physically. He remembers his grandfather from his portrait which hung above the mantelpiece of his house. In the portrait, his grandfather wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. He looked old enough to have lots and lots of grandchildren. The narrator's innocent eyes as a child had a fixed image of his grandmother. To him, it was difficult to believe that she was once young and pretty. He found the thought of her playing games as a child absurd and unbelievable. The narrator remembers her as a short, fat and slightly bent old lady with a face full of wrinkles. Although he could not conceive her as ever being pretty, he acknowledges that she was a beautiful woman who hobbled around the house with one hand resting on her waist to support her stoop. With the other hand, she would always tell the beads of the rosary. His grandmother had silvery white hair which remained scattered on her pale, puckered face. The narrator describes her using a simile. He compares her to the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity and peace. The narrator and his grandmother were good friends, as his parents left him with her while they went to live in the city. She woke him up every morning and got him ready for school. She used to say her morning prayers in a monotonous sing-song tone while she got him ready, hoping that he would learn the prayer. However, little Khushwant never made an effort to learn it. He only listened because he loved her voice. She would then give him a tied bundle which consisted of his wooden slate, which she would have already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, along with his tiny earthen inkpot and a red pen. Then, after a breakfast of stale chapati with butter and sugar, they would leave for the author's school, which was attached to the local temple. The school was attached to the local temple, and while the children learned the alphabet and the morning prayer from the priest, the author's grandmother sat inside the temple reading the scriptures. After school, when they returned home, he and his grandmother fed chapatis to the stray dogs of the village who followed them to their house. Thus, we see how the narrator was nurtured and taken care of by his grandmother in his parents' absence. She was his companion and guardian while he grew up. There was a sense of interdependency where the narrator relied on his grandmother for most of the things, while the grandmother was happy to bring up the little child like a parent. Soon the narrator's parents were settled in the city and sent for him and his grandmother. According to the narrator, this was a turning point in their friendship. The narrator still shared his room with his grandmother, but several things changed. She no longer accompanied him to his English school as he travelled in a motor bus. There were no street dogs, and hence she fed the sparrows in the courtyard of the new city house. As time passed, the author and his grandmother grew apart, even though she woke him up regularly and got him ready for school. She inquired what he was taught in school and was disappointed when he informed her of the teachings of Western science and music. In spite of her eagerness to help him in his studies, she was unable to do it, as the author was being taught rational things like the law of gravity, the sound shape of the world, and Archimedes' principles. She did not understand or approve of the modern teaching methods or the curriculum. His devout grandmother was very upset that the school did not teach him about God or the scriptures. Being a devout person who believed in constant prayers and thoughts of God, she did not approve of the school's curriculum that included music. To her, music had indecent associations and was not for the decent, gentle people. The common link of friendship between the grandmother and the author was snapped when he was given a room of his own as he joined university. The grandmother accepted the change and rarely spoke to anyone. She sat at her spinning wheel from sunrise to sunset. She relaxed only in the afternoons as she sat in the veranda feeding the sparrows little breadcrumbs. For her, it was the happiest time of the day as the sparrows gathered in large numbers around her. It was her way of coping with the loneliness that she probably felt. Some birds sat on her legs and shoulders, and some even sat on her head. She did not chase them away and instead enjoyed their company. Khushwant Singh's grandmother was a compassionate lady who nurtured other living beings like dogs and birds. Next, the narrator decided to go abroad for 5 years to pursue higher studies. He was apprehensive of his grandmother's reaction. However, she did not protest to his desires and even went to the railway station to see him off. She did not say anything and continued saying her beads. At the time of departure, she kissed his forehead. The author cherished the goodbye kiss from his grandmother as he did not expect her to be alive when he would return home after 5 years. However, when he returned after 5 years, she received him at the station. She did not look any older and continued saying her silent prayers. As a sign of her happiness, on the day of the author's return, she fed the sparrows longer than usual, affectionately scolding them. However, in the evening, the narrator noticed a change in his grandmother. Contrary to her daily schedule, that day she collected the women of the neighborhood and sang songs while thumping a half-ruined drum. She sang of the homecoming of the warriors. Undoubtedly, this was to celebrate her grandson's return home. It was a surprise to the narrator, as that was the first time he had not seen her pray. The narrator and his parents had to stop her from overexerting herself. The next day, the grandmother was taken ill. She had a mild fever, and the doctor informed that it would go away. However, the grandmother thought otherwise. She felt that she was nearing her end. She took to praying and lay peacefully reciting her prayers and telling her beads. Being a woman of extreme strength of character, she did not show any sentimental or emotional reactions. She passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was laid on the ground covered in red shroud, as per customs. After a while of mourning, the narrator and his parents left to make arrangements for her funeral. As they returned in the evening to take her away for cremation, they were surprised to see thousands of sparrows scattered on the floor around her. They sat in silence without making any noise. When they carried out grandmother's body for cremation, they flew away silently without touching the food crumbs given to them by the narrator's mother. The author's grandmother is an example of all grandparents who not only shower unconditional love on their grandchildren and are pillars of strength and support for them. It is from them that most young kids learn of spirituality, patience, and kindness. With that, we come to the end of today's video lesson. We hope this reminds you of all your precious memories with your grandparents and helps you to treasure them. See you next in the recap video where we shall discuss some important points from this chapter.